The letter arrived crumpled and stained with trail dust, but Zelda Patterson clutched it like it was salvation itself as she stepped off the stagecoach into Bannack, Montana territory, on a scorching July afternoon in 1868. Her hands trembled beneath the long sleeves of her gray traveling dress, despite the oppressive heat that made other women fan themselves desperately. She had answered an advertisement from a rancher named Graham Jennings, a man she had never seen, promising herself this would be a new beginning far from the nightmares of Philadelphia. The scars hidden beneath her high collar and long sleeves were reminders of a fire that had taken her parents and nearly her own life 3 years ago, leaving her with marks she believed made her unmarriageable, unlovable, and unworthy of the kind of life other women took for granted. Bannack was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered buildings sprawled along Grasshopper Creek, born from the gold rush just 6 years earlier. The main street was a chaos of freight wagons, horses, and miners still hoping to strike it rich, though the easy gold was long gone. Zelda stood beside her single trunk, scanning the crowd for someone who might be Graham Jennings. The letter had described him only as a cattle rancher, 30 years old, in need of a wife to help run his household. She was 22, old enough to know that this arrangement was likely her only chance at a family of her own. "Miss Patterson." A deep voice cut through the noise, and Zelda turned to see a man approaching. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of whiskey in firelight. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his worn hat, and his clothes, though dusty from travel, were well maintained. Everything about him spoke of quiet strength, from his broad shoulders to the confident way he moved through the crowd. Her breath caught in her throat, not from fear but from the unexpected kindness in his expression. "Mr. Jennings." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Graham," he corrected gently, removing his hat. "Just Graham, please. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was manageable," Zelda replied, her fingers nervously adjusting her collar, making sure it sat high enough to conceal the scars that crawled up her neck. She saw his eyes flicker to the gesture, but he said nothing, only bent to lift her trunk with an ease that spoke of years of hard labor. "My wagon is just down the street. The ranch is about an hour's ride from here. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who has prepared a room for you. I thought, given the circumstances of our arrangement, you might appreciate time to settle in before we discuss the particulars." His consideration surprised her. Most men who sent for mail-order brides expected immediate marriage, viewing it as a business transaction with no need for courtship or comfort. They walked through town in relative silence, though Graham pointed out the general store, the assayer's office, and the small church where Reverend Walsh held services every Sunday. Zelda noticed how people greeted Graham warmly, how children waved at him without fear, how the shopkeepers called out friendly remarks. Whatever else he might be, Graham Jennings was clearly respected in Bannack. The wagon was sturdy and well kept, like everything else about him. He helped her up to the seat with a gentle hand, careful not to hold on longer than necessary, giving her space to breathe. As they left town, the landscape opened up into rolling grasslands dotted with cattle, mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. The beauty of it stole Zelda's words, so different from the cramped streets of Philadelphia where she had spent her whole life until now. "It is something, is it not?" Graham said quietly, following her gaze. "I came out here 5 years ago with nothing but a horse and determination. Built the ranch from the ground up. It is not fancy, but it is home." "It is beautiful," Zelda murmured and meant it. For the first time since the fire, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. "I should be honest with you," Graham continued, his hands steady on the reins. I am not good with words, never have been. I work from sunrise to sunset most days. The ranch is doing well, but it takes constant attention. I need a partner, Miss Patterson. Someone who can manage the household, help with the books, maybe tend the garden and the chickens. I know this is not a romantic arrangement, but I promise you will be treated with respect and kindness. You will have your own room for as long as you wish, and I will never ask anything of you that you are not willing to give freely. The sincerity in his voice made Zelda's throat tighten with emotion. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Jennings. Graham, he reminded her again, a slight smile tugging at his lips. Graham, she corrected, testing his name on her tongue. And you should call me Zelda. Zelda, he repeated, and the way he said it, soft and careful, made her feel like her name was something precious. The ranch house came into view as they crested a hill, a solid structure of timber and stone with a wide porch and a view that stretched for miles. Outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, a stable, a chicken coop, and what looked like a bunkhouse for ranch hands. Cattle grazed in the distance, fat and healthy. Graham had clearly not exaggerated about the ranch's success. A small woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was Chinese, perhaps 50 years old, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense bearing. About time you got back, she called out in perfect English with just a hint of an accent. Dinner is almost ready, and I will not have it going cold. Mrs. Chen, this is Zelda Patterson. Zelda, this is Mrs. Chen, who somehow manages to keep this entire operation from falling apart. Graham's affection for the older woman was obvious. Nice to meet you, Zelda said, climbing down from the wagon before Graham could assist her. She wanted to show she was capable, not some fragile thing. Mrs. Chen studied her with eyes that seemed to see far too much, but her expression remained neutral. You look half-starved and completely exhausted. Come inside. I will show you to your room after you eat something. The interior of the house was surprisingly comfortable, with handmade furniture and colorful rugs that warmed the wood floors. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace and windows that let in the golden afternoon light. A hallway led to what Zelda assumed were bedrooms. Dinner was a simple but delicious meal of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and vegetables from the garden. Graham ate with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to solitary meals, but he made efforts at conversation, asking about her journey and telling her about the ranch. Mrs. Chen joined them, which seemed to be normal practice here, and Zelda appreciated the lack of rigid formality. There are 3 hands who work the ranch, Graham explained. Tom, Miguel, and Sam. They are good men, respectful. They take their meals in the bunkhouse usually, but you will see them around during the day. If any of them bother you, you tell me immediately. I am sure they are fine, Zelda said softly. Still, you tell me if there are any problems, any at all. The protective note in his voice surprised her. After dinner, Mrs. Chen showed Zelda to a bedroom that was larger than she had expected, with a real bed covered in a beautiful quilt, a wardrobe, a washstand with a mirror, and even a small writing desk. Graham built most of the furniture himself, Mrs. Chen said. He is good with his hands. Your trunk will be brought in shortly. Breakfast is at dawn, but if you need to sleep late tomorrow, I understand. Traveling takes it out of a person. Thank you, Zelda said, for everything. I know this must be strange, a stranger coming into your household. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. I was a stranger here once too. Graham gave me work when no one else would after my husband died in the mines. He is a good man, perhaps the best I have known. Whatever fears you carry, you do not need to fear him. After Mrs. Chen left. Zelda sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking as she unbuttoned the high collar of her dress. In the privacy of her room, she could finally breathe freely, even if just for a moment. She caught sight of herself in the mirror, the scars visible now, angry red marks that ran from her right shoulder up her neck to her jawline, the result of falling timber during the fire. Her right arm bore similar marks, twisting patterns that she had learned to hide beneath long sleeves. She had been told by more than one person in Philadelphia that these scars made her unmarriageable, that no man would want a disfigured wife. The few suitors who had shown interest before the fire had disappeared afterward, their revulsion barely concealed. That was why she had answered Graham's advertisement, hoping that a man desperate enough for a wife to send for a stranger might overlook her flaws. Now, seeing the beauty of this place and the kindness in Graham's eyes, she feared the moment he would discover the truth and realize he had made a terrible mistake. A knock on the door made her scramble to refasten her collar. "Come in," she called. Graham entered carrying her trunk, setting it down gently by the wardrobe. "I thought you might want this tonight. Mrs. Chen said you looked tired, so I will let you rest. But before I go, I wanted to say something." He paused, his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. "I know you do not know me, and I know this situation is not what most women dream of, but I want you to know that I am glad you are here. I think maybe we can make a good life together given time. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance." "Thank you, Graham," Zelda whispered, overwhelmed by his gentleness. He nodded and turned to leave but paused at the door. "Sleep well, Zelda. Tomorrow I will show you around the ranch properly if you like." "I would like that very much." After he left, Zelda unpacked her few belongings, mostly simple dresses and undergarments, nothing fancy or beautiful. She had brought the wedding dress her mother had made, even though she doubted she would ever wear it. When she finally lay down in the comfortable bed, the windows opened to let in the cool evening breeze, she found herself thinking not of the scars she carried, but of the warmth in Graham's voice when he said her name. The following morning, Zelda woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee drifting through the house. She dressed quickly in another high-collared dress, this one a faded blue that had seen better days, and made her way to the kitchen. Mrs. Chen was already working on breakfast, and Graham sat at the table reviewing a ledger. "Good morning," Zelda said softly. Graham looked up and his face brightened. "Morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Mrs. Chen offered. Breakfast was hearty, eggs and bacon and more of that wonderful bread. Zelda noticed that Graham ate quickly, clearly eager to get to work. "Would you still like that tour?" he asked. "Or would you prefer to settle in more today?" "I would love the tour," Zelda said. "I want to understand how things work here." They started with the chickens, which made Zelda laugh with their fussy pecking and strutting. Graham showed her where the eggs were collected and how to scatter feed. Then the garden, where vegetables grew in neat rows, tended primarily by Mrs. Chen, but needing more hands as it expanded. The barn housed several horses, including a gentle mare named Daisy that Graham said Zelda could ride whenever she wished. "You know how to ride?" he asked. "A little. It has been years, though. Daisy is patient. She would be good for practicing." He stroked the mare's nose affectionately. "Out here, being able to ride is important. The land is too big to walk everywhere." They walked out to where the cattle grazed, and Graham explained his breeding program, his hopes for expanding the herd, the challenges of predators and weather. He spoke with passion about his work, his eyes lighting up in a way that made him even more handsome. Zelda found herself watching him more than the cattle, noticing the way his hands moved when he talked, the careful way he stepped to avoid startling the animals. The three ranch hands appeared around mid-morning, riding in from checking fence lines. They were polite but curious, tipping their hats to Zelda. Tom was older, perhaps 40, with graying hair and a weathered face. Miguel was younger, maybe 25, with a ready smile and kind eyes. Sam was somewhere in between, quiet and serious. All three treated Graham with respect that seemed earned rather than demanded. "Miss Patterson will be staying on," Graham told them simply. "She is to be treated with the same respect you would show any lady. Understood?" "Yes, sir," they chorused, and Zelda saw genuine warmth in their greetings. These were good men, she realized, the kind who followed Graham because they wanted to, not because they had to. As the day wore on and the sun climbed higher, Zelda felt the heat becoming oppressive. She longed to roll up her sleeves, to unbutton her collar, but she did not dare. Graham noticed her discomfort. "It is hot today," he said. "We should head back to the house. No sense in getting sunstroke your first full day here." They walked back together, close but not touching, and Zelda found herself acutely aware of him, the way he moved, the sound of his breathing, the occasional glance he sent her way when he thought she was not looking. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Did he find her plain? Disappointing? Was he already regretting his decision to send for her? That evening after dinner, Graham asked if she would help him with the ranch books. "I am not good with numbers," he admitted. "I can manage, but it takes me twice as long as it should. Mrs. Chen helps when she can, but she has enough to do." Zelda discovered she had a knack for the bookkeeping, quickly understanding the system Graham had developed and finding ways to improve it. They sat side by side at the table, heads bent over the ledger, and occasionally their hands would brush when reaching for the same page. Each touch sent electricity through Zelda, making her hyper-aware of his proximity, his warmth, the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. "You are good at this," Graham said with admiration. "This is going to make my life so much easier." "I am glad I can help," Zelda replied, meaning it. She wanted to be useful, to prove she was worth keeping. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zelda took over the bookkeeping entirely, freeing Graham to focus on the ranch work. She helped Mrs. Chen with the garden and the household tasks, learning to make bread and preserve vegetables. She practiced riding Daisy, gradually building her confidence until she could ride out to bring lunch to the hands working distant fence lines. Graham was always nearby but never hovering, giving her space to find her place in this new life. But always, she kept her scars hidden. She wore high collars even in the worst heat, long sleeves that made her sweat but kept her secrets safe. She caught Graham looking at her strangely sometimes, puzzlement in his eyes, but he never asked. His respect for her privacy was both a relief and a frustration. Part of her wanted him to ask, to demand the truth, because the weight of the secret grew heavier each day. 3 weeks after her arrival, Bannack held a summer social, a dance and picnic to celebrate the mid-season and give the scattered community a chance to gather. Graham asked Zelda if she would attend with him, as his intended. They had not yet married, both seeming content to let the relationship develop naturally, but the town knew why she had come. Zelda wore her best dress, a deep green that had survived the fire and her journey west. It had long sleeves and a high collar, like all her dresses, but the color brought out her eyes, and Mrs. Chen had helped her arrange her dark hair in a style that was almost pretty. When Zelda emerged from her room, Graham stopped mid-step, staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You look beautiful," he said softly. No one had called her beautiful since the fire. The word struck her like a physical blow, bringing tears to her eyes that she blinked back quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. The social was held in a large clearing near the creek, with lanterns strung between trees and a makeshift stage for the musicians. It seemed like the entire town had turned out, families and single miners and shopkeepers all mingling together. Zelda felt suddenly shy, aware of the curious stares directed her way. Graham stayed close, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a protective gesture that made her feel cherished. They were introduced to countless people, names and faces that blurred together. Reverend Walsh, who expressed hope that he would be performing a wedding soon. The general store owner, Mr. Peterson, and his wife. The school teacher, Miss Adams, who seemed friendly until her eyes lingered too long on Graham, making Zelda realize she was not the only woman who found him attractive. Several ranchers who clearly respected Graham, asking his advice on cattle and grazing lands. When the music started, Graham led her to the dance floor. Zelda had not danced since before the fire, and she stumbled at first, self-conscious and uncertain. But Graham was patient, his hand firm on her waist, guiding her through the steps until she relaxed into the rhythm. Being held by him, even in the formal structure of the dance, made her heart race. "Are you having a good time?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Yes," she admitted. "I was nervous, but this is nice." "Everyone likes you," Graham said. "Mrs. Peterson told me she thinks you are lovely. Reverend Walsh said you have a good head on your shoulders. You are making quite an impression." Zelda laughed softly. "They are just being kind." "No," Graham said seriously. "They mean it. You are special, Zelda. I hope you know that." She looked up at him, at the sincerity in his golden eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. This was more than gratitude or convenience. She was falling in love with this gentle, hard-working man who treated her like she mattered. And that terrified her, because she knew he did not know the truth about her, about the scars she carried, about how damaged she truly was. The evening grew late, and Zelda began to feel overheated in her long sleeves. The July night was warm, and the dancing had left her flushed and uncomfortable. She stepped away from the crowd, finding a quiet spot near the creek where she could catch her breath. Graham followed, concern etched on his features. "Are you all right? We can leave if you are not feeling well." "I am fine," Zelda assured him. "Just needed some air." They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the creek burble and the distant music. Graham moved closer, and Zelda's breath caught. Was he going to kiss her? Did she want him to? Yes, she realized. She wanted it desperately, but before he could lean in, a commotion erupted from the dance area. Shouting, followed by the unmistakable sound of a fist hitting flesh. Graham immediately ran toward the noise, and Zelda followed. Two miners were fighting, rolling in the dust while others tried to pull them apart. Graham waded in without hesitation, his strength allowing him to separate the combatants and hold them at arm's length until they stopped struggling. "Enough," he commanded, his voice carrying authority. "This is a community gathering. You want to kill each other, do it somewhere else." One of the miners, younger and clearly drunk, spat blood and glared. "He cheated me, owes me money." "Then take it up with the sheriff, not here." Graham released them both, ready to intervene again if needed, but the fight had gone out of them. The incident broke the spell of the evening. Families began gathering their children, and the social started to disperse. Graham found Zelda in the crowd, his knuckles scraped but otherwise unharmed. "I am sorry about that," he said. "Are you ready to go home?" Home. The word resonated in Zelda's chest. When had the ranch become home? The ride back was quiet, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived, Graham helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," he said. "It meant a lot, having you there." "I enjoyed it," Zelda said honestly. Despite the excitement at the end, Graham smiled, then grew serious. Zelda, I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I need you to know something. This is not just a business arrangement anymore, not for me. I have come to care for you deeply these past weeks. I understand if you do not feel the same, but I wanted to be honest. Zelda's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. I care for you too, she whispered. More than I expected to. But Graham, there are things about me you do not know, things that might change how you feel. Nothing could change how I feel, he said with absolute certainty. But you can tell me anything whenever you are ready. No pressure. She wanted to tell him everything right then, but fear held her tongue. Instead, she stood on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Good night, Graham. His hand came up to touch where her lips had been, his eyes wide with surprise and pleasure. Good night, Zelda. That night, Zelda lay awake for hours, Graham's words echoing in her mind. He cared for her. He thought nothing could change his feelings. But would that still be true when he saw the scars? When he realized she was damaged, marked, less than whole? The next morning brought a crisis that pushed personal matters aside. One of the cattle had been found dead, clearly killed by a mountain lion. Graham gathered the hands and organized a hunting party, concerned that a big cat so close to the ranch put everyone at risk. He wanted Zelda and Mrs. Chen to stay in the house with the doors locked until the threat was dealt with. I do not like leaving you, Graham said, checking his rifle. But this cannot wait. A mountain lion that has developed a taste for cattle might go after horses next, or worse. We will be fine, Zelda assured him, though unease prickled her spine. Be careful. He surprised her by pulling her into a quick embrace, the first time he had held her beyond the formality of dancing. I will be back before dark, he promised. The men rode out and Zelda and Mrs. Chen secured the house. The day passed slowly, tension making every small sound seem ominous. Zelda tried to focus on the ledgers, but found herself constantly going to the window, watching for any sign of Graham's return. As afternoon faded toward evening, Mrs. Chen called out in alarm. Zelda rushed to where the older woman stood at the kitchen window. One of the horses in the corral was acting spooked, and then Zelda saw it, a flash of tawny fur near the barn. The mountain lion had circled back. We have to scare it off, Zelda said, grabbing the shotgun Graham kept by the door. She had never fired a gun in her life, but she knew the basics from watching Graham clean it. Are you crazy? Mrs. Chen demanded. Graham said to stay inside. If it kills the horses, that is a disaster for the ranch. We have to do something. Zelda checked that the gun was loaded, her hands steadier than she expected. She stepped out onto the porch, raising the shotgun and firing into the air. The recoil knocked her back a step, but the loud blast had the desired effect. The mountain lion bolted, disappearing into the brush beyond the barn. Zelda quickly retreated into the house, her heart racing from adrenaline. You are either very brave or very stupid, Mrs. Chen said, but there was approval in her voice. When Graham and the men returned an hour later, successful in tracking and killing the mountain lion, Zelda told him what had happened. She expected anger, but instead he looked at her with something like awe. You protected the ranch, he said simply. Thank you. That night, emboldened by the day's events and the growing feelings she could no longer deny, Zelda made a decision. She could not keep living in fear of Graham discovering her scars. She had to tell him, to show him, and let the consequences fall where they would. She found him on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Graham, can we talk? Of course. He gestured to the chair beside him, but Zelda remained standing, needing to move to keep her courage up. You said I could tell you anything, she began, her voice shaking. And there is something I need to show you, but I am afraid. I am so afraid of how you will react. Graham stood immediately, concern flooding his features. "Zelda, whatever it is, you can trust me." She took a deep breath, her hands moving to her collar. Slowly, with fingers that trembled, she unbuttoned the high collar she had worn every day since her arrival. She pushed the fabric aside, revealing the angry red scars that crawled up her neck. Then she rolled up her right sleeve, showing the twisted patterns that marked her arm. "There was a fire," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "3 years ago in Philadelphia. My parents died. I barely escaped. The burns healed, but they left these. Everyone said I was ruined, that no man would ever want me. That is why I answered your advertisement. I thought maybe a man desperate enough to send for a stranger would not care about scars. But I should have been honest from the start. I am sorry I hid this from you. If you want me to leave, I understand." The silence that followed was agony. Zelda could not bring herself to look at Graham, could not bear to see the revulsion she was certain would be in his eyes. She started to refasten her collar with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. Then Graham's hands covered hers, stopping her movements. "Look at me," he said softly. "Please, Zelda, look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze, bracing for rejection. But what she saw took her breath away. There was no disgust, no disappointment. Only tenderness and something that looked remarkably like wonder. "You think these make you less?" he asked, his fingers gently tracing the scar on her neck. His touch was feather-light, reverent. "You think these scars are something to be ashamed of? Everyone else thought so," she whispered. "Then everyone else is a fool." He bent his head and pressed a soft kiss to the scar on her neck, making her gasp. "These scars are part of you. They show that you survived something terrible, that you are strong and brave." Another kiss, higher on her neck. "They tell a story of courage." He took her scarred arm in both hands, kissing the twisted skin of her wrist, her forearm, her elbow. "Every mark is beautiful because it is part of the woman I love." "You love me." Zelda's voice broke on the words. "I love you," Graham confirmed, looking into her eyes. "I have been falling in love with you since the day you arrived. Your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. The way you laugh at the chickens and work on the ledgers with such focus. How you face down a mountain lion to protect my horses. These scars do not make you less, Zelda. If anything, they make you more. They are part of your story, and I want to know every part of you." Zelda could not stop the sob that escaped her. Graham pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried, years of shame and fear and loneliness pouring out. He stroked her hair and murmured soft reassurances, kissing the top of her head, her temple, her scarred neck, each kiss an affirmation of her worth. When the tears finally subsided, Zelda pulled back enough to see his face. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have loved you since you called me by my first name on the ride from town, but I was so afraid you would not want me if you knew." "I want you," Graham said fiercely. "I want every part of you, the brilliant mind that understands those books better than I ever could. The brave heart that faces down mountain lions. The beautiful soul that treats Mrs. Chen with respect and kindness. And yes, I want these scars, because they are part of the woman who has become my whole world." He kissed her then, really kissed her, his lips meeting hers with a gentleness that made her melt against him. It was everything a first kiss should be, tender and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Zelda felt like she was glowing from the inside out. "Marry me," Graham said. "Not because of any arrangement or advertisement, but because I love you and want to spend my life with you. Marry me, Zelda." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Graham, I will marry you." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Bannack, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Zelda wore the dress her mother had made, simple but beautiful, and for the first time did not try to hide her scars. She wore her hair up, her neck exposed, her sleeves short enough to show her scarred arm. If people stared, she did not care. Graham had kissed every scar and called them beautiful, and that was all that mattered. Mrs. Chen cried during the ceremony, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The ranch hands dressed in their best and grinned throughout. Reverend Walsh spoke about love and commitment, and the blessing of finding your true partner in this wild land. When Graham kissed his bride, sealing their vows, the congregation erupted in cheers. The celebration afterward was joyous, with food and dancing and well wishes from everyone. Miss Adams, the school teacher who had eyed Graham at the summer social, congratulated Zelda with genuine warmth, admitting she could see the love between them was real. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson gave them a beautiful quilt as a wedding gift. Tom, Miguel, and Sam presented them with a hand-carved sign for the ranch gate, burned with the words Jennings Ranch, ESD, 1863. As the sun set and the party continued, Graham pulled Zelda away for a private moment. They stood at the edge of the clearing, his arms around her waist, her head resting on his chest. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Zelda replied honestly. "A few months ago I thought my life was over, that I would spend my days alone, defined by my scars and my loss. But you showed me that I could be loved, scars and all. You gave me hope again." "You gave me something too," Graham said. "I had the ranch, had built something I was proud of, but it felt empty without someone to share it with. You made this place a home, made my life complete." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Graham taking his time to worship every inch of her, paying special attention to the scars he had promised to honor. He traced them with his fingers and his lips, whispering words of love and admiration until Zelda believed, truly believed, that he found her beautiful. The months that followed were perhaps the happiest of Zelda's life. She threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, taking over all the bookkeeping and correspondence, expanding the garden with Mrs. Chen's help, learning to ride well enough to accompany Graham on short trips to check the cattle. The ranch prospered under their joint management, Graham's expertise with the livestock combining perfectly with Zelda's head for business. When winter came, bringing snow that blanketed the land in white, they spent long evenings by the fire, Graham reading aloud while Zelda worked on sewing or mending. Sometimes they would talk for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. Graham told her about growing up in Ohio, about losing his own parents to cholera and heading west to escape the memories. Zelda shared stories of her childhood in Philadelphia, her parents' loving marriage, her mother's skill with a needle, her father's terrible jokes. "I wish they could have met you," Zelda said one night, tucked against Graham's side. "They would have loved you." "I wish I could have known them," Graham replied. "They raised an incredible daughter." In the spring, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never imagined she would have children, had accepted that her scars made such a future impossible. Now, standing with her hand on her still flat stomach, she marveled at how much her life had changed. Graham's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. He lifted her and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "We are going to be parents," he kept repeating as if he could not quite believe it. "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, needing to hear it. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Graham said, his hand joining hers on her stomach. "You have given me everything, Zelda, everything." The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda struggled with sickness in the early months, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable and swollen. But Graham was attentive and caring, taking over tasks she normally handled, making sure she rested, bringing her cool water and rubbing her aching feet. Mrs. Chen prepared special foods to help with the nausea and offered wisdom from her own experiences as a mother. Years ago in China, before she immigrated, when Zelda's time came in early December, the snow was falling heavy and thick. Graham rode through the storm to fetch the midwife from town, refusing to leave Zelda's side otherwise. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, but finally, their son was born, screaming his displeasure at the cold world. They named him James after Graham's father, and he was perfect. Tiny fingers and toes, a dusting of dark hair, eyes that would eventually turn the same whiskey color as his father's. Graham held his son with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed with love for this small person they had created. "He is beautiful," Graham whispered, "just like his mother." Zelda, exhausted but happier than she had ever been, smiled. "He has your nose." "Poor child," Graham joked, making Zelda laugh despite her tiredness. Those first months with James were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but also filled with moments of pure joy. Watching Graham with their son, seeing the gentleness with which he handled the tiny baby, made Zelda fall even more in love with her husband. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor at night when James was fussy, sang off key lullabies that somehow always worked. As James grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. They added more cattle, hired 2 additional hands to help manage the expanding operation, and built a new barn to accommodate the growth. Zelda's bookkeeping became more complex, tracking investments and sales across 3 territories, and she loved the challenge of it. When James was 3, Zelda became pregnant again, this time with a daughter they named Rose, after Zelda's mother. She had Graham's coloring but Zelda's delicate features, and she was spoiled from birth by everyone on the ranch. Tom carved her little wooden horses, Miguel taught her Spanish songs, and Sam always seemed to have a peppermint in his pocket just for her. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons, of cattle drives and harsh winters, of birthdays and holidays, of watching their children grow. James became a serious boy who loved helping his father with the horses. Rose was all mischief and laughter, charming everyone she met. 2 more children followed, another son named William and a second daughter named Grace, filling the house with noise and love. Through it all, Graham never stopped treating Zelda's scars as beautiful. He would trace them absently while they sat together in the evenings, kiss them in passing, tell their children the story of how brave their mother had been. The children grew up understanding that scars were not marks of shame but evidence of survival, badges of honor earned through hardship overcome. On their 10th anniversary, Graham surprised Zelda with a trip to the hot springs, a half-day's ride from the ranch. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch the children, and they rode out together on a crisp autumn morning. The hot springs were in a secluded canyon, steam rising from the mineral-rich water, surrounded by golden aspens. They soaked in the warm water as the sun set, turning the sky brilliant shades of orange and purple. Zelda leaned back against Graham's chest, his arms around her, completely content. "You ever regret it?" Graham asked quietly. "Answering that advertisement? Coming all the way out here to marry a stranger?" Zelda turned in his arms to face him. "Not for a single moment. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. A home, a family, love beyond measure. How could I regret that?" "I am the one who should be grateful," Graham said. "You took a chance on me, on this life. You made me complete." "We made each other complete," Zelda corrected, kissing him. "That is what love does." They stayed at the hot springs until the stars came out, talking about their children, their dreams for the future, the life they had built together. When they finally rode back to the ranch, Zelda felt renewed, reminded of just how blessed she was. As the children grew older and the ranch continued to prosper, Graham and Zelda became pillars of the community. They helped establish a proper school in Bannack, with Zelda serving on the board. Graham was elected to the territorial council, representing the interests of ranchers and farmers. Together, they supported the church, contributed to community projects, and opened their home for gatherings and celebrations. Zelda never forgot where she had come from, the frightened woman who had arrived in Bannack, hiding her scars and her shame. She made a point of befriending newcomers, especially women who arrived alone or uncertain. When a young widow named Sarah came to town with 2 small children, Zelda helped her find work and housing. When a farmer's wife struggled with depression after a miscarriage, Zelda sat with her and listened, offering comfort born of her own experiences with loss. "You have a gift for helping people," Graham told her one evening, watching her prepare a basket of food for a family whose father was ill. "I remember what it was like to feel hopeless," Zelda said. "If I can help someone else find hope, then my own struggles had meaning." Their children grew into fine young people. James, serious and hardworking, took over more and more of the ranch operations as he entered his late teens. Rose, creative and determined, announced her intention to become a teacher and began studying with an intensity that made her parents proud. William showed a talent for working with horses that surpassed even his father's. Grace, the youngest, had inherited her mother's head for numbers and loved helping with the books. When James turned 20, he fell in love with a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread. Graham and Zelda watched their son court Mary with the same earnest determination he brought to everything, and they were not surprised when he asked permission to propose. The wedding was held at the ranch, a grand celebration that brought people from miles around. Seeing James marry Mary, watching him pledge his love with such sincerity, Zelda found herself reflecting on her own wedding day nearly 20 years earlier. She caught Graham's eye across the crowd, and he smiled at her, that same warm smile that had made her feel safe on her very first day in Montana. They had built something lasting, not just in the ranch and the family, but in the love that sustained them through every challenge. Rose left for Teachers College in Helena when she turned 18, bringing both pride and sadness to the household. Zelda cried the day they put her on the stage, even though she knew it was right for Rose to pursue her dreams. Graham held her hand as the stage pulled away, understanding her mixed emotions without needing words. "She will come back," he said. "This is her home, no matter how far she travels." He was right. Rose returned after 2 years, armed with her teaching certificate and a head full of progressive ideas about education. She took over the Bannack school and began implementing changes that improved learning for all the children. She met a young lawyer named Daniel who had just opened a practice in town, and their courtship was a whirlwind of intellectual debates and shared passions for justice. Their wedding was smaller than James's, but no less joyful. William chose to stay on the ranch, showing no interest in any life beyond working with horses. He bred and trained some of the finest stock in the territory, developing a reputation that brought buyers from as far away as California. When he finally fell in love, it was with a quiet girl named Emma who had grown up on a neighboring ranch. Their wedding was simple and beautiful, held outside under the vast Montana sky. Grace, brilliant and independent, shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to go east to study business and finance. Zelda understood her daughter's ambition, even as it meant sending her furthest from home. They sent Grace off with enough money for her education and their blessing, proud of her courage to pursue such an unconventional path for a woman. As their children married and started families of their own, The ranch began to fill with grandchildren. James and Mary had 3 children in quick succession, all boys who loved spending time with their grandfather, learning about cattle and horses and the land. Rose and Daniel had twin girls who were as smart as their mother and as charming as their father. William and Emma's son was quiet like his mother, but had his father's gift with animals. Grace, after finishing her studies, returned to Montana and married a banker, eventually having 2 daughters who inherited their mother's business acumen. Graham and Zelda watched their family grow with deep satisfaction. The house that had once seemed too large for just the 2 of them now rang with the laughter and chaos of grandchildren running through its halls. Holiday gatherings required extra tables set up outside, the whole family coming together to share meals and stories. On a warm evening in the summer of 1898, exactly 30 years after Zelda had first arrived in Bannack, Graham and Zelda sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their hair was gray now, their faces lined with the marks of age and weather, but their hands were still entwined as they had been for 3 decades. 30 years, Zelda mused. It seems impossible that so much time has passed. Best 30 years of my life, Graham said simply. Mine too, Zelda agreed. She looked down at her arm where the scars had faded to pale silver with age, no longer the angry red of her youth. Do you remember the night I showed you these? I was so afraid you would send me away. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met, Graham said, lifting her scarred hand to his lips and kissing it gently, just as he had done countless times over the years. I remember feeling honored that you trusted me enough to reveal something you had hidden from the world. And I remember knowing with absolute certainty that I would love you for the rest of my life. You kept that promise, Zelda said softly, tears gathering in her eyes. Every single day, you have shown me that I am loved, scars and all. You gave me a life more beautiful than I ever imagined possible. We gave each other that life, Graham corrected, pulling her close. We built it together one day at a time. 4 children, 11 grandchildren, a ranch that has prospered beyond anything I dreamed when I started with nothing but determination. But all of that means nothing compared to having you by my side through it all. You are my greatest blessing, Zelda. You always have been. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the stars emerging one by one overhead. Inside the house, they could hear Mrs. Chen, now in her 80s but still insisting on helping where she could, preparing dinner. Laughter drifted from the bunkhouse, where the ranch hands were finishing their day. In the distance, cattle lowed peacefully and horses nickered in the barn. I want you to know something, Zelda said eventually. That day I arrived in Bannack, I thought I was coming to start a new life because my old one was over. But I was wrong. My life did not start over when I came here. It started for the first time. Everything before was just preparation for finding you, for becoming the person I was meant to be. You did not just accept my scars, Graham. You helped me accept them. You taught me that being broken does not mean being worthless, that surviving does not make you damaged, it makes you strong. Graham's arms tightened around her. You taught me things too. You taught me that success is not just about building something material like a ranch. Real success is building a life filled with love and family and purpose. You taught me that being vulnerable is not weakness but courage. And you showed me what real partnership means, how 2 people can become stronger together than they ever were apart. As if summoned by their words, James appeared from the direction of his house, built just a quarter-mile from the main ranch. Mother, Father, Mary sent me to tell you dinner is ready at our place. She made your favorite pie, Father, and says if you do not come soon, the boys will eat it all. Graham stood, helping Zelda to her feet with the same gentle care he had always shown. Well, we cannot let that happen. Tell Mary we will be right there. As they walked hand in hand toward their son's house, following the path worn smooth by countless family visits, Zelda reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Montana territory as a frightened woman hiding her scars, convinced she was unworthy of love. She had found instead a man who saw those scars and called them beautiful, who loved her not despite her imperfections, but because of the whole person those imperfections helped create. Their story was not one of perfect people living a perfect life. There had been struggles, difficult times when the ranch barely broke even, winters that tested their endurance, moments of grief when friends passed away or when the realities of frontier life proved harsh. But through everything, they had faced it together, their love growing stronger with each challenge overcome. Dinner at James and Mary's house was a boisterous affair, the three boys clamoring for attention, Mary efficiently managing the chaos while keeping up a conversation about the ranch's plans for the fall cattle drive. Zelda watched Graham with their grandsons, patiently answering questions about horses and ranching, and her heart swelled with love for this man who had given her everything. Later, after the pie had been devoured and the boys finally settled down, Graham and Zelda walked back to their own house under a sky brilliant with stars. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of prairie grass and the distant promise of rain. "I hope we have many more years together," Zelda said quietly. "I cannot imagine life without you." "We will have as many years as we are blessed to get," Graham replied. "And I will spend every one of them loving you, thanking God that you answered my advertisement, that you took a chance on a rough rancher who barely knew how to express his feelings." "You learned," Zelda said with a smile. "You learned very well." In the years that followed, they settled into the comfortable rhythm of elder statehood in their family and community. They passed more responsibilities to James and William, who ran the day-to-day ranch operations with skill and dedication. Rose's students regularly won academic competitions, making the Bannack School one of the most respected in Montana. Grace and her husband opened a bank in Helena that became known for its fair practices and support of small businesses. All their children visited regularly, bringing the grandchildren for extended stays during summers and holidays. Graham and Zelda became the matriarch and patriarch of a sprawling family clan. Their wisdom sought on everything from business decisions to relationship troubles. They took joy in watching their grandchildren grow, seeing pieces of themselves reflected in these young people who would carry their legacy forward. On their 40th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a massive celebration. Children and grandchildren came from across Montana, along with friends from throughout the territory. Tom had long since retired, spending his days whittling on the ranch porch, but Miguel and Sam still worked the ranch, now with their own sons who had grown up learning the trade. Mrs. Chen had passed away peacefully 5 years earlier, but her memory was honored with her favorite dishes prepared for the celebration feast. As Graham and Zelda stood before their assembled family, 4 decades of love and partnership evident in every gesture between them, Rose stood to make a toast. "To my parents," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "who taught us that love is not about finding someone perfect, but about seeing someone perfectly. Who showed us that real strength comes from vulnerability, that scars are beautiful when they are marks of survival, and that building a life together means supporting each other's dreams while creating shared ones. Thank you for showing us what marriage should be. Happy anniversary." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Graham pulled Zelda into a kiss that made their grandchildren giggle and their children smile knowingly. When they broke apart, both had tears in their eyes. 40 years, Graham said to Zelda, just for her ears. And I love you more today than I did the day we married. More than the day you arrived in Bannack. More than I thought it was possible to love another person. I know, Zelda replied, touching his face gently. I feel the same way. You took a broken, frightened woman and showed her she was whole and brave. You looked at my scars and called them beautiful until I believed it too. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose, and a love that has sustained me through everything. I am so grateful I answered your advertisement, Graham Jennings. It was the best decision I ever made. They danced that night, as they had at their wedding 40 years earlier, though their steps were slower now and Graham's back was not as straight as it had once been. But the love between them was as evident as ever, visible in every glance, every touch, every shared smile. As the celebration wound down and family members began retiring to their various accommodations around the ranch, James approached his parents. Father, Mother, I wanted you to know something. William and I have been talking and we have decided to name the ranch officially. We are putting up a new sign at the gate, the Jennings Patterson Ranch. Your names together because this place was built by both of you, equally. Zelda felt tears spring to her eyes. She had long ago taken Graham's name, becoming Zelda Jennings, but seeing her maiden name honored alongside his touched her deeply. That is beautiful, she whispered. Thank you. Graham simply nodded, too moved for words, and pulled both his sons into an embrace. The golden years of their lives were peaceful and fulfilling. They spent mornings sitting on the porch watching the ranch wake up, afternoons reading together in the comfortable silence of long-time companionship, evenings surrounded by whichever family members had come to visit. They took a trip to see Grace in Helena, marveling at the city she had made her home. They attended Rose's 50th birthday party, an elaborate affair hosted by her appreciative former students. They celebrated when James's oldest son took over significant ranch responsibilities, ensuring another generation would continue the legacy. Through it all, Graham never stopped his ritual of kissing Zelda's scars and calling them beautiful. Even as age made them both more fragile, as Graham's hands developed arthritis and Zelda's steps became slower, his love remained constant and demonstrative. He would trace the faded marks on her neck while they sat together, kiss her scarred arm when he helped her with her coat, tell her daily that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever known. One autumn evening, when Zelda was 70 and Graham 78, they sat together watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Graham had been moving more slowly lately, his breathing sometimes labored, but he insisted he was fine, just getting old. Zelda held his hand, memorizing the feel of his calloused palm against hers, the strength that remained despite the years. I need you to promise me something, Graham said quietly. When I am gone, and I know that day is coming sooner than we would like, I need you to remember something. Those scars you were so afraid to show me all those years ago. They are part of what made you the incredible woman you became. Do not hide them again. Wear them proudly, as a reminder of what you survived and the beautiful life you built after survival. Promise me. Graham, do not talk like that, Zelda protested, though tears streamed down her face. You are going to be here for years yet. We do not know that, Graham said gently. And I need to say this while I can. You are the love of my life, Zelda. Every moment with you has been a gift. But I need to know you will be all right, that you will remember how strong you are, how beautiful you are, scars and all. I promise, Zelda whispered, but only if you promise the same. Remember that you gave a frightened woman the courage to love again. That you built a legacy not just in land and cattle but in children and grandchildren who carry your values forward. that you showed everyone who knew you what it means to be a good man." "I promise," Graham said, pulling her close. They sat that way until full darkness fell, holding each other, grateful for every moment they had been given. Graham passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months later, during a cold December night. Zelda woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that made her wonder how her heart could keep beating when it felt so broken. The funeral brought people from across Montana, testament to the lives Graham and Zelda had touched over their decades in Bannack. Their children and grandchildren rallied around Zelda, providing support and comfort, but nothing could fill the void Graham's absence created. For the first time in 50 years, Zelda was truly alone. In the months that followed, Zelda struggled to find her footing without Graham. The ranch continued operating under James and William's capable management, but it felt empty without Graham's presence. Zelda would catch herself looking for him, expecting to see him coming in from checking the cattle or sitting in his chair by the fire. It was Rose who finally broke through Zelda's grief. She came to visit one spring afternoon, 6 months after Graham's death, and found her mother sitting in the house with her collar buttoned high and her sleeves pulled down, hiding her scars as she had not done in decades. "Mother," Rose said gently, "what are you doing?" Zelda looked down at herself, realizing what she had done without thinking. "I do not know," she admitted. "Without your father here to tell me they are beautiful, they just feel like scars again." Rose knelt beside her mother's chair, taking her hands. "Listen to me. Those scars are beautiful because they are part of you. Father did not make them beautiful by loving them. He recognized the beauty that was already there. He helped you see yourself clearly, but that clear vision does not disappear just because he is gone. You are still the same strong, brave, incredible woman you have always been." Tears streaming down her face, Zelda unbuttoned her collar, letting it fall open. "I miss him so much." "I know," Rose said, embracing her mother. "We all do. But he would not want you to hide again. He would want you to live fully, to wear your survival with pride, to remember everything you built together. Honor his memory by being the woman he loved, the woman he always saw so clearly." Rose's words gave Zelda the strength to begin healing. She started venturing out more, spending time with her grandchildren, resuming her involvement in community activities. She wore her scars openly again, and when people asked how she was managing, she told them honestly about the grief, but also about the gratitude for 50 years of love and partnership. On what would have been their 51st anniversary, Zelda visited Graham's grave, bringing wildflowers from the meadow where he had first told her he loved her. She stood before the simple headstone, tears and smiles mixing as she remembered. "I am all right," she told him, speaking aloud even though she knew he could not answer. "It hurts every day missing you, but I am living the way you wanted me to. Our children are thriving, our grandchildren are growing into wonderful people, and the ranch continues to prosper. And I am not hiding anymore. I wear my scars proudly, just as you taught me. They remind me of everything I survived, yes, but also of your love, of how you kissed everyone and called them beautiful until I believed it too. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything." A breeze stirred the wildflowers, and Zelda chose to believe it was Graham's way of responding. Zelda lived another 10 years after Graham's death, active and engaged until nearly the end. She watched more grandchildren marry and welcomed great-grandchildren into the family. She saw the ranch modernize while maintaining the values Graham had established. She continued her community work, her bookkeeping for the family businesses, her support of education and charity. When she finally passed away peacefully at the age of 80, surrounded by her children, the whole territory mourned. The funeral was even larger than Graham's had been, a testament to the life she had lived and the impact she had made. She was buried beside Graham under the vast Montana sky they had both loved, their headstones side by side for eternity. But the legacy Zelda and Graham built lived on. The Jennings Patterson Ranch continued to thrive under family management, now in its fourth generation of operation. The values they had instilled, hard work, integrity, compassion, and the belief that scars were marks of survival rather than shame, passed down through their descendants. Rose's granddaughter became a doctor, inspired by her great-grandmother's story of survival and resilience. James's great-grandson took the ranch into the 20th century while maintaining its environmental stewardship. Grace's descendants became leaders in business and finance, known for their ethical practices and community support. William's line continued the tradition of breeding exceptional horses, their stock sought after across the West. And in every generation, the story was told of how Zelda Patterson arrived in Bannack in 1868, a frightened woman hiding her scars, and how Graham Jennings had kissed everyone and called them beautiful, teaching her that love sees not what the world calls flaws but the wholeness of the beloved. It became a family legend, a reminder that real love is unconditional, that scars tell stories of survival, and that the greatest legacies are built not on wealth or land but on love and family. The original house still stood more than a century later, preserved as a family heritage site. Visitors could see the porch where Graham and Zelda had sat countless evenings, the room where they had raised their children, the desk where Zelda had managed the ranch books for decades. And in a place of honor hung a portrait painted when they were both in their 60s, Graham's hand resting on Zelda's shoulder, her scars clearly visible, both of them looking at each other with expressions of such profound love that it moved viewers to tears even generations later. That portrait, more than anything else, captured the essence of their story. Not a tale of perfection, but of two imperfect people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. A frightened woman who learned she was brave. A lonely man who discovered the joy of partnership. Two people who built a life, a family, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. All because Graham had looked past what the world called scars and seen instead the beautiful story of survival, courage, and hope. Their love story became the foundation upon which generations built their own lives, proving that the most powerful legacy is not wealth or land, but the example of how to love completely, accept fully, and see clearly the beauty in every person, scars and all.